out units, Greek units, which will fight in the very constricted area immediately in front of the wall. The Persians won't be able to bring forward their full force because of the constricted terrain immediately in front of the wall.
Meanwhile, the people of Delphi consulted the oracle, which advised them to pray to the winds, for they will be good allies to Greece. No sooner had they received this counsel than a violent storm erupted. The formidable Persian navy was strung out along the harborless Magnesian coast, where more than 200 ships were destroyed. Xerxes was furious at the unexpected loss and bewildered by the meager challenge to his mighty army at Thermopylae. The great king ordered an advance scout to take the full measure of his opponent.
When he sees the Spartans, rather than crying or offering to surrender or offering to negotiate, they're actually grooming themselves, combing their hair, putting oil on, shining their weapons. And the idea is that they're looking forward to this battle with zest rather than terror.
And so the horsemen just stood there in amazement, and they couldn't believe that these few small people were going to be trying to defend the pass.
Demaratus, the exiled Spartan king who had fled to Persia more than a decade before, was promptly summoned for counsel. King Xerxes demanded to know, how tough are these guys?
And if we brought one of them here into the court, could he kill 10 of us? And Demaratus told them, no, man for man, they're not much better than anyone else. But in a group, he said, you will find, in a cohesive unit that's going to defend this pass, you'll find they're worth many times their numbers.
The message from Demaratus was clear. Do not underestimate the Spartan warriors. Fighting was in their blood. It was a way of life. And now the scene was set. With both Greek and Persian forces prepared for battle, what would happen next would decide the future of democracy. (480 BC, late summer. The fate of the Western world was at hand. At the narrow mountain pass of Thermopylae, battle lines were drawn between Persia and Greece. 300 Spartans and 7,000 Greek allies dug in, prepared to fight a Persian army at least 200,000 strong. For the Spartans, it appeared to be a suicide mission, but they had to slow down the Persians long enough for Greece to assemble a counterattack.
When King Leonidas was leaving to defend the pass at Thermopylae, and he knew that he was going to die, his wife Gorgo, as they were saying goodbye, asked him what were his instructions to her, and he said, marry good men and bear good sons.
And that's the thing about the Spartans. They are ready to die. They are prepared to die. They think of death in battle for their state as truly a glorious thing.
And so, in the name of honor and glory, the Spartan soldiers stood defiant and serene, even ready to take on the huge Persian force an advance scout had warned them about.
He said that Persian archers were so numerous that when they fired their volleys, it blocked out the sun. So the one Spartan, Dionyscus, said, good, then we'll have our battle in the shade.
On August 18th, 480 BC, 4 days after arriving at the hot gates of Thermopylae, the two sides readied for battle. The Persians' overwhelming numbers provided them with all the confidence any army could want. But the bronze and crimson Spartan phalanx stood unintimidated and ready to fight.
Typically we hear of a formation 8 ranks deep. The reason for having only 8 is the first 2-3 ranks actually fight, because you've got very long spears. Therefore, one function of the guys behind is simply to push the ones ahead into fighting. So the cohesion and the push of the back ranks is absolutely key in its way as the prowess and the bravery of the guys in the front.
The Persians quickly found their vast numerical advantage was no advantage at all.
Once you've given up the idea of maneuver and the idea that Persian horsemen can play no role, then it's almost like a sieve that you forced all of these people into a bottleneck, and the Persians have to go through bronze and iron, and they've never done that before.
And they are chopped to ribbons. In the narrow confines of the pass, heavy armor of the Greeks, their long thrusting spears, their big shields proved to be quite effective against the lighter armor, the shorter spears of the Persians.
It would be a terrible thing, noise of people screaming, people defecating, people urinating, people falling down, people being trampled, spears breaking.
And it really turns into just a scene of carnage.
The Greek phalanx was virtually impenetrable, and by early afternoon, the battlefield resembled a snapshot from hell. The whole pass was littered with corpses, and the Spartans showed no sign of cracking.
The Spartan phalanx is almost like a corps de ballet in its ability to move and its ability to execute quick decisions on the battlefield and to move as a unit. And that's one of the things that makes the Spartans so formidable in battle.
Xerxes was determined to destroy the Spartan phalanx and stop the bloodbath. He ordered his personal bodyguards, known as immortals, into the fray. Only they wore anything approaching the heavy armor of the Greeks. Still, it wasn't enough. A savage battle left the king's finest troops in total disarray, and as the curtain of death fell around them, they broke off the fighting and retreated.
Hoplite mentality and ideology is summable up in one phrase, which is stay your ground or keep in your place. And what the Spartans always contributed was that steadiness, that sort of rock solidity.
With darkness falling, Xerxes abandoned the struggle. His colossal beast brought to its knees, the Persian losses in the thousands. Across the blood-spattered plain, the Greeks attended to far fewer casualties. Leonidas walked among the dead, knowing all too well that in a matter of hours, his men would meet a similar fate. Dawn broke cool and clear on the morning of August 19th, 480 BC. King Xerxes of Persia, still reeling from massive losses on day one at Thermopylae, mounted his second assault on the Greeks. This time, he formed a special brigade, men reputed to be of outstanding bravery and daring. He promised them rich rewards to storm the narrow pass and threatened them with execution if they broke ranks and fled.
The Persian king just stays at it. I mean, this is bulldozer tactics. He figures you just keep on sending your men forward, and eventually you'll wear down these Greeks.
But once again, the crack Persian force was no match for the Greeks and the elite band of Spartan warriors. As the battle raged on through a second bloody day, it became another large-scale massacre. Slain and wounded Persians were piled high in front of the Greek line, the pungent smell of death everywhere.
The Greeks are taking some casualties, but the Persians are taking massive casualties. And it's simply too demoralizing to let this go indefinitely.
From his gold throne high on a hill, Xerxes watched his finest troops suffer savage losses. The king was forced to call off another ill-fated attack.
After all, the Persian king can probably take 50-to-1 casualties and not really feel it. But on the other hand, if he has to take 50-to-1 casualties, and this goes on for weeks on end, there's going to be a tremendous morale problem in his army. So he needs some other way to win this thing.
It was at this crucial point that a Greek named Ephialtes, in exchange for a generous reward, agreed to betray his countrymen by guiding the Persians through a hidden pass over Mount Kalidromos.
In Greek, the name Ephialtes has become an ordinary word for all time to mean nightmare. This is the Greek word for nightmare.
The path that Ephialtes laid out would allow Persia's downtrodden soldiers to outflank the Greeks, a tactic Xerxes believed would finally bring them down. The elite Persian immortals climbed steadily all night and at dawn the crackling of dried leaves announced their arrival on the other side. The hot gates had become a death trap for the Spartans. Steep cliffs and the ocean on one side, the mountains on the other, with Persian soldiers amassed front and now rear.
And at this point, Leonidas takes stock of the situation. He's commander-in-chief in this battle zone, and he orders the bulk of the Greeks at Thermopylae to retreat. The Spartans will all stay there with him. To a man, the Spartans stay there.
After the pass is turned, then we get the great Day 3, one of the most memorable days in Greek history.
Battered and wounded, the proud Spartan warriors donned their heavy armor one last time. As they prepared to die, King Leonidas delivered his final words.
Now, eat a good breakfast, men, for we'll all be sharing dinner in hell.
He decides not ever to surrender, but to fight absolutely to the last man.
As the sun rose above the hills, the Spartans and their few remaining allies were under attack from front and rear. Still, they fought on valiantly, flinging themselves with furious desperation into the bloody field of battle. When King Leonidas suffered a fatal wound, the Spartans fought savagely for possession of the corpse and succeeded in dragging it away. Finally, around noon on August 20th, 480 BC, the Spartans made their last desperate stand.
We're told that their weapons are finally broken, they're discarded, their shields are broken, their armor is rent, and finally they're using their teeth, their hands, and fighting with fist against tens of thousands of Persians who finally surround them on a hill and do not want to waste any more of their manpower and bury them in a sea of arrows.
By early afternoon, it was over. All 300 Spartans lay dead, along with several hundred more of their allies. But the Persian losses were staggering, estimated at 20,000. With victory finally in his grasp, Xerxes inspected the battlefield. He found the body of King Leonidas hidden away and had him decapitated, his head displayed on a pole for all to see. It was a barbaric gesture intended to prove that the Spartans were mere mortals after all. But the badly demoralized Persian troops weren't convinced. They knew the war had only just begun, and that more Spartans lay in wait.
So there is a fear or almost a sense of mystery about the Spartans that infects the Persian ranks after Thermopylae. Thermopylae, we should be clear, is probably the greatest single defeat in any one day in Greek history. That being said, it does have some dividends for the Greeks. It allows the Greeks to mobilize to the rear in Attica. It gives them a sense of heroism, of coalescence around this act of bravery, and it does strike fear into the Persians that these are people they hadn't counted on.
Many years later, a monument was erected at Thermopylae to honor the 300 Spartans who heroically held off 200,000 Persians for 3 ferocious days. Here, on an unadorned stone, was engraved a classically simple epitaph. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie.
It stresses the point that this had to be done, no matter what. No matter what private perceptions and private thoughts were. The laws of Sparta dictated for Spartans to be there at this time.
In the one sense, it was something the Spartans needed. They needed a Spartan Battle of Marathon. They needed a time in which they could show that Spartan virtue was absolutely outstanding. Even if they didn't win, they had won the moral victory because they died to the last man.
What transpired at Thermopylae has been burned in the memory of Western civilization. After the fall of the Alamo, the local newspaper in Nacogdoches, Texas, proclaimed that Thermopylae now has a parallel.
With the Greeks' first line of defense now breached, the Persians were free to drive south through Attica, implementing a scorch and burn policy that spared nothing and no one. Crops and farms went up in smoke. Statues of gods were demolished, temples destroyed. Even the Acropolis was set on fire. When word spread throughout Greece that the whole country was ablaze, many Athenians were on the verge of mutiny. They would never have believed that the tide was about to turn. In the last decades of the 5th century BC, all of the forces in Greece were briefly united against a single enemy, the seemingly invincible force of the more than 200,000 strong Persian army. After the Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BC, the Persian army and navy were free to drive south towards Athens. Greek morale seemed low and defeat imminent. But the Greeks decided to place their trust in a shrewd and respected Athenian commander named Themistocles.
And the decision is made by the great commander Themistocles to evacuate the hinterland and go over to the island of Salamis and rest the hopes of Greece on a sea battle.
The Athenians then decide to withdraw from their territory, not try to face down the Persians in some kind of a hopeless land battle, but rather withdraw from their territory, send their women and children to refugee camps in southern Greece behind the Isthmus wall, and to put all of their faith in their navy.
Under cover of darkness, the Greek navy embarked for the Bay of Salamis, some 60 miles down the coast. With its narrow channel, Themistocles was confident Salamis was the ideal spot to counter the superior numbers and greater mobility of the Persian fleet.
And Themistocles knows if they can break the Persian navy, then they've really won the war, or at least they've gone a long way towards winning the war because of the interdependence of the Persian army and the Persian navy.
With the Greek navy now in place, Themistocles devised a brilliant tactic to lure King Xerxes into making a disastrous move.
Themistocles sends him a slave and says, Xerxes, Themistocles would like to be your friend, has seen the light. And you can capture the entire Greek fleet if you just attack now.
In a letter delivered by a slave, Themistocles spelled out plans for a Greek withdrawal from Salamis, to be carried out under cover of darkness the following night.
Xerxes thinks this is a great opportunity. After all, he had experience with traitors. Ephialtes had showed up just about at the right time at Thermopylae, and now here was this guy Themistocles. Great.
Convinced the Greek navy was in total disarray, Xerxes decided it was the perfect time to strike.
So Xerxes does it. Launches the Persian fleet against the Greek fleet in the very constricted waters around Salamis, which is exactly what Themistocles had hoped for. Themistocles knew those waters intimately. He had his fleet stationed to take advantage of the constriction. He also knew when the wind was going to come up behind them, and so when they could charge out most effectively. And what happens is that the Persians charge forward, the Greeks charge forward on their ships.
I think we could say it was probably the greatest sea battle in sheer numbers involved in the history of Western civilization.
While the Greek fleet moved out like a giant octopus from its rocky lair, King Xerxes was safely perched atop his gold throne at Mount Agileus. By the time he realized his powerful vanguard was trapped, the noose had already tightened. The Persian advantage in numbers, 400 triremes to 300 for the Greeks, was quickly neutralized in the narrow straits.
And the whole thing gets locked up into kind of a logjam very quickly. The Persian ships are not able to maneuver.
So once you could just turn the battle into ramming and make some incursions inside the Persian fleet, then drowning would be your greatest ally.
The Greek ships have posted Marines on them, hoplites, who then jump from ship to ship, doing great massacre.
It was probably the single largest casualty rate of any sea battle in history. There may have been 60,000 Persians that drowned right off the coast of Attica.
It's a great disaster for the Persians. It's an out-and-out victory for the Greeks.
The water was thick with bodies and wreckage. The Persians lost 200 warships, the Greeks just 40. Xerxes was angry and humiliated.
The result of the Battle of Salamis is that Xerxes and the bulk of his army has to evacuate Greece. He simply can't keep a grand army in Greece unless he can be absolutely sure of being able to resupply it. With loss of control at sea, with loss of dominance on the waves, he is at risk, and the bulk of his army then is evacuated.
But Xerxes' cousin, General Mardonius, was personally chosen to carry on the war in Greece. With a crack force of 30,000 men, Mardonius moved north to Thessaly, where there were adequate supplies to see his men through the winter. Meanwhile, Athens and Sparta were bickering jealously among themselves. The Athenians, who bore the brunt of the naval battles, expected a quid pro quo from Sparta's celebrated hoplite warriors, demanding that they lead a ground assault against the Persians. Mardonius learned of the deepening rift between his rivals and attempted to exploit it.
One of Xerxes' vassals, who is a Macedonian king, is sent to the Athenians and to the Spartans with an offer.